In this short video, I'm really excited to share the story with you about how this book was born, a manual for manifesting your dream life. Now, it was written a couple years ago, and the story is I was staying with my parents at the time in California, which is where I grew up, and I was meeting with a friend who had spent some time volunteering at the Esalen Institute. I knew at this period in my life that I wanted to spend time in a spiritual community, and in my mind it just felt natural that that place would be Esalen, so I wanted to hear about her experience. We went to a tea house to talk about it, and as we were chatting, someone overheard our conversation, and she mentioned a place called the Finhorn Foundation. Now, when she mentioned it, I had never heard of it before. I didn't really think much of it. It sounded interesting, but of course I was still focused on Esalen, and I thought that's where I was going to go next. But then the next day I went to a used bookstore, and I remember I went into this room into the back that they let me go check out some of their newest books that arrived. And my hand was just led to one book on the shelf, and I pulled it out, and it was called Call of the Trees. And on the back, I saw the author was Dorothy Malin. And what's so crazy about that is I found this out as I read the author bio. She's one of the 3 founders of a spiritual community in Scotland called the Finhorn Foundation, which I had just heard the day before from this woman. And in that moment, I knew this was a sign, I have to go there. And so that's where I went. And I went there, and I didn't know it at the time, but this was a couple weeks before lockdown was happening, or about to happen. And so I went for their experience week, which is a week-long program. Absolutely loved it. It changed my life, and it was just such a powerful experience. It felt like the first time I was in a community of people that all kept saying the most important thing you can do is follow your intuition. Go within, they called it inner listening, and then follow it. And I just felt like these are my people. And so I wanted to stay, and I stayed for another week through another one of their programs. And then halfway between the 3rd week was when the lockdown started happening. And essentially I had a decision to make. Do I stay in this community, or do I go back to California? Of course, it was scary to stay because everything was so unknown at that time, but I knew I had to stay. I just felt a strong connection to this place. And so they were very generous to offer me a place to stay. I still had to pay for it, but I was just grateful to be able to be there. And I would go into this place I was staying, and I lived with one other roommate, but because of COVID, we spent a lot of time on our own. And I would just go into nature every day, just wander through this spiritual community, explore it, mostly spending time on my own. And there was one place in this community called the Original Garden that I felt drawn to when it was time to write this book. So when it was the time, I just felt a really strong feeling within me. I want to write a book, I have to write it, like something wants to come through. I would go to this place called the Original Garden in the spiritual community, and I would write. And it was stream of consciousness, the words just kept coming through really fast, and I was a transcriber essentially for the words. And then at the end of each day, after I finished writing, I would go back to where I was staying and I would type it up. And it was when I was typing up the words that I was actually learning from them. So when I was transcribing, I didn't even remember a lot of what I wrote, but I remember as I typed it up, I was learning from the words so much. And this happened for 5 days in a row, and after those 5 days, the full book was written. Now, of course, it didn't look like a finished book like this. It was just a document on my computer, but I was so excited that this message came through. And I was so grateful that it came through in this beautiful, magical, mystical setting. It just felt right. And another crazy thing that happened was the woman on the back of the book, Dorothy Malin, was the last living founder of the 3 founders of this community. And while I was there, she passed away, which was very sad. And also, I felt some kind of connection I can't put into words, in the sense that I was there at the right time, like I was meant to be there at that specific moment. And I just have so much love and gratitude for her, for all the 3 founders of this community, and also everyone that lives in that community. This place has changed my life more than most other places I've been to, and it will always have a place in my heart. So if you're ever in Scotland or near Scotland, and you feel inspired to visit the Finhorn Foundation or watch some of the content that the founders have put out on YouTube, I highly recommend it because it's such a beautiful place, and it's where this book was born, and this book also changed my life. So yeah, that's the short version of the story about how this book was made.